before the snow came down, just before the snow came down. Steve and I had gone to the grocery store without knowing the other one went. We ended up with 2 bags of potatoes, and we got tired of eating potatoes, and some of them sprouted. Now, mostly potatoes, carrots, onions are treated with a growth regulator. That's a chemical based on a plant, some normal or natural hormones that retards the sprouting so that they keep longer. But even those that have been treated with that eventually are going to be able to sprout. So I cut them up into chunks and took my granddaughter out who needed something to do, and we planted those. They're out by the utility pole in Tracy's garden.
Oh, okay.
So should you see them coming up, you'll know it's there.
Yeah.
I've planted onions that way. I haven't tried carrots that way
No.
because they really take a long time to sprout. The onions work out all right. Garlic didn't. Garlic doesn't give you much. You can get garlic scapes, but you're not going to get a bulb generally if you plant sprouted bulbs. I like being out this time of year when there's no snow on the ground. Actually, when there's snow on the ground, I like to be out there too, but I can't do the kind of weeding things that get your gloves wet. Ugh, wet, cold fingers are terrible. I'm thinking about taking apart the mulch pile that Steve's made for me and putting it into buckets. So we want to take it over to either my son's house or our friend Tina's house, because I don't need that mulch right now, and I'd like it to not start breaking down. So we thought, well, we'll put it in the buckets, and that way we can put it in the back of the truck, take it over there, and we don't have to load it in a wheelbarrow, dump it, and load it again.
Yeah, to load a wheelbarrow, to dump it, and not dumping it at the spot you're supposed to, and then have to load it and dump it again.
Yeah, it doesn't like
I'd rather haul buckets.
Yeah, so we'll put buckets in. But while we're out there, it's nice and it's quiet, and very shortly the lawn machines are going to come back, and all that mowing and blowing.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I remember one time leaving a client's house, and as I pulled away, I heard a blower start up, and I thought, oh, here we go with the blowers. And I looked at who was using a blower? A man on a walker holding the blower with one hand and walking on. I said, now that's who those machines were made for. These young guys that I see walking around blowing stuff and blowing it the other day, they're blowing off the lawn that they just edged and into the street. They're just blowing it into the street. It just a lot of them rake things up and sweep things up. But this year I'm actually feeling sorry for them, at least in our area, for this. It's been a very, very heavy year for pine cones and some of the spruces too.
Yeah, very heavy on the pines. So
this has been one of the things that I've found to keep myself busy in the winter, is I've been out picking up cones every day. If I see cones on the ground, I pick them up. I've been picking them up off the neighbor's lawn too. They're from our trees. I've been picking them up and throwing them into the garden as mulch. But some people I notice are not picking them up. And I told Steve, I said, what do they think? I don't know what they're going to do with all those cones. And you said
when they're going to mow right over them.
They're waiting for their mowing people to come and mow them up.
And they're going to get their mowers resined up.
There's so much resin on those cones. The idea of these blades, even on your own lawn, turning into gummy, ripping up the grass blades. I feel sorry for them like this.
Well,
this is a good thing to hire the kids for. Don't pay them per cone though, because I picked
it gets too expensive.
Yeah, I think I've picked up about 7 wheelbarrows full of cones, and that's a lot of cones.
Yeah.
It's got the pine siskins down in our area though, and it's fun watching the pine siskins. Speaking of bird feeders, as we were before we got started officially here, that pine siskin, it's littler than a goldfinch, which is littler than a sparrow. But it is a mighty bird. Oh man, the pine siskin gets on the feeder, and all comers are chased away. Watching them on the Bird Buddy that Steve has, the feeder that has a camera in it, and has now been upgraded without his asking it. It's been upgraded to also take video or live video. You watch these birds and you realize that they are definitely related to dinosaurs. T-Rexes, the pine siskins are related to. I mean, they're vicious. Somebody called it the bird's antics. I said, they're not antics. This is a matter of survival out there.
Yeah.
Okay. We've been back out seeing people face to face, which is great fun. So we've got our calendar kicked back up again. It's also in the About Us menu on Garden A to Z. So if you go to the main page, the home page, and go to that main menu, About Us will have in it a calendar, and you can scroll through and read about where we're going to be, just in order of where we're going to be, or you can jump. There's a pick a date on our calendar link there. That'll take you down to the bottom, and you can just pick a date, May 6th or May 8th, and click on the date, and it'll take you to a description of that. So coming up, going to be at the Blair Memorial Library, where Steve and I met with Jean and Donna just the other day. They're getting ready to do a new garden around the gazebo, and we thought, well, that's a great place to have a talk about rejuvenating a high visibility garden. It's going to be free. All you got to do is make sure that you've got a seat. Call the library.
Reserve it.
It's not a huge room. And we'll talk about that on April 17th. On April 20th, we're going to be at Ray Wiegand's open house, which is always a great event. It's not, I'm not sure if they're gonna have a petting zoo this time, but they make homemade donuts. They have vendors selling
Lots of vendors and lots of nice.
giving out things, and a lot of various talks. So we'll be there talking about color and wildlife, etc. And then I don't know, Margie is Margaret is probably on the webinar right now. She can tell us. I think the Royal Oak Garden Club meets at the Royal Oak Senior Center on off of Crooks Road, but I'm not sure where we're going to be. But you can meet us there or at the library. We're going to be at the library, the Waterford Township Library, next Friday. We would have been there yesterday,
But
you need to be able to see the ground to move plants. We're going to be lifting plants, redoing a garden, adding soil to it. And if you're interested in any of those, you can also ask us about them. Just send us an email. And there's a description there of Free for All Fridays, which we were talking about, I think, before we officially started here, but we need to talk about now. We decided that it's tying up people's time on Saturday, and also, at any rate, that we'd like to move the question and answer session that we have before the webinar officially starts, and this in our garden that we're doing right now, and move that to an hour on Friday that we open to everybody. We're sure that we'll get more of the webinar people, but we'd like to make sure that these questions that we're answering by email and by text, we'd like to spread those answers out a little bit more rather than have them only go to one person. So that'll be from 7 to 8 on all Friday nights that there's not a webinar the next day, because the webinar we will still open up early to talk. And we will send a link to that each week to anybody who is a subscriber of the webinars, or who just is on our email
list,
our newsletter mailing list. We'll let everybody know, here's the Zoom link. We could end up with a Zoom link that will just be the same link all the time. We're not sure. And we'll definitely post it on the website, but there will be a place where you can figure out.
We're still working out how to do these things too.
It's always new. Sonia may or may not be there. She has a lot of other things going on, but she said she'd try it out and see what happens, because we're not sure how we'll manage it. And it is better for Steve. He is not a morning person. In the morning, he is often snoozing, and the dogs are snoozing with him. I mean, how you can have a 60-pound lab draped across you and be asleep, I don't know.
You're nice and warm.
Yeah. He is more an evening person than a night person, so that'll work for him. Are there any questions before we get going into focus on spring startup? Because we've got a few minutes here.
Yeah, Stacy says, oh, actually, sorry, Mark was in line. When can you take off the burlap arborvitae, assuming it doesn't snow? But I think the snow doesn't really matter at this point, right? For the arborvitae?
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't matter too much, but if it depends on why you have the burlap there. If the burlap is there to hold them together, then leave it on for a little bit longer, because there still could be some heavy snow with these ice storms that tend to happen in April quite frequently. If they're there to keep the deer from browsing, then you could take them off and replace them with netting to try to keep them from chewing too far down into the branches. If they're there to keep the salt from getting on them, then well, they shouldn't have it against the arborvitae anyway.
You shouldn't have it touching that.
But if you're just trying to keep them from turning the brown that they can in severe cold weather, then take them off, because we're past that point, and they should be able to start getting some green, encouragement for green on their branches. So you can take them off anytime.
And Nancy has a hand up.
Morning, Janet and Stephen. I was looking at the newsletter that you posted, number 247.
Yes.
And I saw that in some places there were things that you could go directly to, links that you could go directly to, but there was a section on daffodils that not blooming. And I got to that once, and then I went a couple days later to get back to it. I couldn't remember how I got back to it. Is there a place where the entire newsletter
Yes.
is downloadable?
Yes, if you go to the homepage on our website,
Mhm.
you'll find that right, depending on the size of your screen, either on the left below the big picture or scroll down just below the big picture, you'll find our current newsletter is posted. If you click there, that takes you to the linked list that says this newsletter has these 4 or 5 articles and has the links on them. So you should be
Okay.
able to anytime go in, or from the newsletter that we sent out didn't have all of the links made because I was posting things day by day, but they're all
Okay.
there now on that one. And you should be able to find them. Yeah, daffodils not blooming. It's so discouraging to plant.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gina's also noting she wants to spread the word about the Friday Q&A. Can you repeat how non-subscribers can get there?
All anyone needs to do is send us an email that says, I want to be on your list, and we'll put them on the newsletter mailing list. And they will then also be on the Free for All Friday reminder list. Otherwise, we will have our Free for All Fridays will have a link on the homepage that will go to our webinars and Free for All page. And the link, we'll post the link there as well. It's not there yet because we haven't set that meeting up. Our first one will be next Friday. Next Friday.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're starting out next Friday, so it'll be there. But send us an email and you end up on our list. Steve keeps that list. He spends a considerable time making sure that the list is clean. And
We try.
he takes people off if they has to be off. He keeps people on. He
I
checks
try to
each
notify people that are getting
bounce
back.
Yeah.
If it's a hard bounce, I can't do anything. If it's a soft bounce, we might be able to contact you.
Don't even get him into soft bounces and hard bounces. You don't want to know.
And then Stacy says, please ask Janet and Steve if they've seen the articles indicating this year will be a very bad year for insects, especially cicadas. Are there any precautions we can do? I mentioned in the chat that cicadas aren't going to hurt anything, so don't worry about them. But have you heard about a general insect boom and if there's anything to prep for?
I would actually stand up on top of my desk and jump up and down and cheer if there was an actual insect bloom.
We need
Maybe
insects,
because
people.
Because they've been falling off, but yes, it's probably going to be a heavy insect year because some are going to be coming out early. The mosquitoes were already out. A week ago, I was chased inside by mosquitoes. It was amazing that it was only 50 degrees outside, and yet they waited till 5 o'clock to show up and came out then. So some things will be coming out early. Some things didn't get killed back as much as they would, or at least that's the guess. Now, I'm also noticing our local mob of starlings. There's about 100 starlings that hang out in a bunch here. They are working the lawns, and so are the sandhill cranes, and so are the robins. And what they're doing is pulling. What did the naturalists say at that meeting the other day? They're pulling invertebrates out of the ground, worms, grubs, all those kinds of things are there. So it's anybody's guess, but they'll probably be coming out earlier, many of them, than they were. That's
what it's going to be. It's going to be earlier.
While I was pulling the creeping speedwell out of the thyme, so I'm down on my knees and down on the thyme, I noticed that little tiny flies of some kind are hanging out in the thyme. So when I pull up the speedwell, this little fly would come out and walk around the top going, wait, am I supposed to be up already? But yeah, it might be a little bit of a tough year for those kinds of things. And the ticks, the ticks are probably going to keep getting worse, but that I really think, as well as being a warm winter, that this whole tick problem has to do with so many people spraying for ticks. Ticks are not insects, they're arachnids related to spiders more than anything else. And insects develop resistance. You spray and kill ticks. Okay, that kills a bunch of ticks, but a few of them don't die. And they're the ones that reproduce.
And then they have less vulnerability to that.
Generation by generation, they get tougher. It's called chasing the red queen. If you're an ecologist, in Alice Through the Looking Glass, I think it was. she is running to catch the Red Queen, and the March Hare is telling her, you can run faster. She's just going to run faster. So we keep changing things using a different insecticide. And what we do is we just encourage the things that we're trying to kill to have only the ones that have a genetic ability to resist that, to stick around. And it works even with the biological controls that they have. So they genetically engineered tobacco plants. Let me see, tobacco has nicotine in it, and nicotine is deadly to a lot of things, including people and insects. But the tomato hornworm can eat tobacco, just like it can eat tomatoes. It can eat nicotine. It's fine with nicotine. In fact, when the birds pick up a tomato hornworm, they tend to drop it because it exudes nicotine through its spiracles, through its breathing pores. So it's like picking up somebody who's got bad smoker's breath and drop them right away. But they've engineered it to have a gene with the milkweed sap in it, because they can't eat milkweed sap. But what we're going to find out is give it enough time.
It will.
And sometimes that's only 4 or 5 years, because insects go through generations much more quickly than we do. In a number of years, we'll have tomato hornworms that can eat milkweed sap too.
Yeah.
Anyway, it might be a bad year for bugs. That's a long talk on that, sorry.
Yeah, yep. I think that is all we have for now.
I think a good wrap up, excellent wrap up, Diane. Diane
Perfect
saying,
point.
perfect point. There are more beneficial insects out there in most home gardens. You probably have hundreds, literally hundreds of species of insects out there, and 90% of them are hunting other things.
Are good guys.
Numbers wise, you may have as many or more pest insects, numbers wise, than you have of the beneficials, but you have more kinds of beneficials that are in all different ways attacking these things.
And the beneficials get affected by the spraying too.
And if you have birds, you have them eating everything. I mean, hummingbirds are eating spiders, and robins are grabbing caterpillars, and chickadees are eating everything they can get a hold of, including little tiny things that when you go to look at what they were picking at the tree, you can't even see anything.
Yeah, the Carolina wrens are always mousing around. I think some of those little flies out in the time
and they're active.
chased.
Right, the nuthatches creeping along on the tree trunk are eating insect eggs. I mean, there's a lot going on out there that we shouldn't be trying to spray. That's our King Edward yarrow. I wondered where I planted that. Well, now I'm gonna have to move your penstemon out of there.
Yeah,
I'll take it
I
out of there,
figured that
because the
when I
King
saw
Edward
that.
yarrow is more, King Edward yarrow
got
is
a lot
so
of
cute. It's a yarrow that's only about 8 inches tall. And
It's one of
really,
our
yeah,
favorites. I agree.
really hard
And
to
I love
follow.
Pessimon, and she can move it.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So we'll wrap up in our garden today. Go ahead and keep putting your questions into chat, and Sonia will keep lining them up for us when we get to a chance to talk about them.